Okay, I was born in a town called Sistersville, West Virginia, a tiny little place. And I grew up through high school in West Virginia.
Oh, okay.
We moved in a couple towns to Wheeling and then to Morgantown. At 18, I went to college in Ohio, in Oberlin College. He worked for a company that wanted to hire people to teach English in Japan. This was back in 1980, I guess. And I thought, that sounds great, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with myself, so I applied and got accepted. And so around the end of 1981, I came to Japan for the first time. Kind of a spontaneous thing, although I never really thought of going to Japan, my best friend from about 5th grade all the way through high school, his mother was Japanese. And so I'd always learned a little bit about Japan, and because he was my good friend, I learned, I always had, I don't know what you might call it, a good impression or whatever
I see.
of Japan. His mom was a fabulous potter. She still is. A really beautiful pottery she made. But mostly I didn't have many expectations. I just thought I would just come and see it. Actually, when I first came here, I actually was irritated by a lot of people constantly asking me, was it really different than what you expected? And I thought, well, before I came, I'd never seen the place, so I didn't have any expectations. I just thought I'll come and see it and learn it. I don't know about the hardest moment, but generally the hardest thing was learning the language. Not being able to communicate well was really tough. And I'd sleep about 12 hours a night just because of the exhaustion of trying to understand things. And so that was hard. And I think, I don't know, I forget, did I mention it to you guys that when I first came here, after a couple months, the stress was so great I lost all my fingerprints.
I remember you telling us that
smooth.
story. Yeah.
And then it was like you can't grab things very well. It's really wild. But it was apparently a sign of stress. I didn't understand what was going on, but then I went to see a doctor and he says, oh yeah, you're stressed. And early on, I really didn't like constantly being, how should I call it, pointed to and constantly thought of as a gaijin, like an outsider. It made me feel like I hated the word gaijin because it literally means outsider.
Yeah.
That was a little stress inducing. But after I learned the language well and started working with people on things like history, I got really interested in history pretty early on. Then most of that kind of went away. At least a year. I mean, the high stress period ended in about 3 months. And then it was still a little difficult for a year, but from starting my second year, I was really enjoying living in Japan. My first stint, I lived here 5 years almost. My wife, Yachio. And my daughter was born in my 5th year here. She just came last night from America.
Oh wow.
Yeah, she came into Narita. We met her at the station, stayed at her place last night, and this morning I took her to Haneda Airport so she could fly to Okinawa. And she's going to be diving there for about a week and a half on a research project. She does marine biology, that's her thing. And then she comes back here on the 23rd, and that's when we really get to spend time together.
Children do you have?
2 children.
Oh, okay.
My daughter May, and then my son Ken. And he was born in America after we went back. I decided to go to grad school in America to get my history PhD. MGU. Well, let's see. I'm mainly a professor at UC Santa Barbara since 1991. And 4 years ago, a professor friend of mine said that the UC Education Abroad program was still looking for somebody to teach at MGU for 9 months. And I thought, well, okay, I'll try that. That sounds like fun. I thought I could come here and do this and do some research too. And they hired me, I suppose you might call it. It's not exactly hiring, it's really just an appointment. I'm still getting paid by the UC system. And so I came and did this 4 years ago and had a very good time. And that's why I then applied again. I thought, well, I want to do this again. And so after a few years working hard enough and long enough that my dean would let me go again, I applied for this year. Meigaku. The people are very friendly, and the students are interesting. They're pretty outgoing and active for Japanese students, especially those in the Kokusai Gakubu, and then the other Kokusai thing that they've got the KC with the KC. I think people are really accepting here. A whole bunch of foreigners, and that's kind of nice. And it's just an interesting school. There's a lot of interesting faculty too. So that's interesting. I don't know. I kind of like it all over. I guess for me, my favorite spot is next to campus. It's Myoka Park.
Yeah, I thought it would be,
And that house down there, I just love that. Oh, my proudest moment and accomplishment. Wow. Well, I'm an historian, so, and I publish a lot on Japanese history. And my second book, which I published in 2013, is probably the best thing I'll ever do. And so I feel really proud of that book.
Oh, what's the book called?
It's called Performing the Great Peace. What is the subtitle? I can't even remember it now. But it's about political culture in Tokugawa, Japan. So it's a history of Tokugawa, Japan, and kind of the culture of politics. Yeah, definitely, actually. It's I've always kind of like to look at things that are different from the way where I grew up and all of that. I mean, I really grew up in kind of small town West Virginia, so it's constantly looking for something new and interesting. And coming to Japan was nice that way, and then doing history is really that way. That's the thing I love most about doing history is you really get to interact with things that are just so totally different than your own world. As what you might call as different as it may seem from modern America is really very similar in a lot of deep ways. And you do history, and then you look at the way people lived 200 years ago, and then then you're in a really foreign country, in a totally complete world. That's the way I think about it. So, I'm so depressed about the modern political climate. I'm not even sure I want it recorded.
No. Okay, yeah. That's why. Yeah, it's kind of serious. It's so good question.
And one thing history teaches you is everything falls apart, and I've never seen a moment quite like now that the United States might fall apart, and it's kind of been structuring a certain kind of world order for the past 60, 70 years. That whole order may very well be on the brink of kind of a rapid revolutionary change. Yeah, there have been some good changes, I mean, within all of the society, relevant societies, but all in all, I think, how shall I call it? The dangers are quite big. I think the importance of civility. It's one of the things I really love about Japan is the really high value placed upon behaving civilly. And that's something I really love. I wish Americans had that a lot more. Personal identity that's built out of cooperation with other people that's much bigger in Japan than in America. I think that's something admirable that America can probably benefit from. A greater willingness to kind of follow through with one's kind of vision or idea of how to make things better or improvement. It's probably more what you might call a kind of an activist type mindset and behavior in America, where people probably feel a little more willing to try to improve like situations than generally you see in Japan. Although the reason I took so much time in my head is it's actually a very complicated issue, and I'm not really sure if I understand how people are activists in Japan. Because the way it works in Japan has to do a lot more with understanding the context of reception much better than happens in America. And so it makes it a little less visible to what you might call American sensibilities in terms of activism. And so the reason I've taken so long is I feel like maybe I don't really understand Japan well enough yet on that issue. Is one of my reservations. The kind of, how should I call it, national identity is much more unquestioned in Japan, and much more kind of just an assumed unspoken frame of reference for most knowledge than it is in the United States and America. And one of the things I prefer about America is that people are much more quick to kind of relativize national identity and ethnic identity and things like this. I think people think about it generally a bit more sophisticatedly in America than they do in Japan. And that's something I prefer. Well, if you want to make friends, join groups.
Yeah.
The way you make friends is by being part of a group or a team or something. And that's much more important in Japan than elsewhere. So that's my first bit of advice to everybody. People in Japan know much more instinctively how to relate to you if you're like part of a team or part of a group or something, a club or anything like that. And then they say, yeah, okay, it's perfectly fine for me to become closer to this person. Whereas I think becoming friends is a bit more casual in America. It's easier to become friends with somebody outside of some kind of a group situation in America. And so that's probably one bit of advice I'd give.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the most harmful expectation would be that things would be just like they are at home, and if you don't accept the fact that they're going to be different, then that could cause a lot of harm. Expecting everything to be just like the way it was back home. And you do have some people like that. Usually people who choose to travel aren't like that, but occasionally you'll get that.
Kochi?
Yeah, it's a city in southern Shikoku. It's my home. I feel happier there than anywhere else. When I retire, I would move to Japan for sure, and probably to Kochi. And I might even retire early if that were possible. But I like living here so much. I really enjoy it.